Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I am here with Rebekah Luebcke, who is the Vice President of Operations for Crown Asset Management. Becca and I recently had the opportunity to be stuck together at the airport for many hours. I got to know her very well and really appreciate you coming on and chatting with me today, Becca.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. You know, as you started telling me your story and about who you are, it was just so interesting. And I want to talk to you today about leadership and leadership boundaries. And I think you've got a really interesting approach based on your background. Now, you speak at so many different conferences around the industry on a lot of different subjects, fintech and others. And I'm sure that most of the people that are watching here today know exactly who you are and have seen you speak already. But for those that are new to the industry, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure. So I studied music in college, and naturally that led to a career in debt collections. I studied music at the University of Mississippi, and my junior or senior year of my undergraduate degree, my sister was working in the accounting department for a check collection agency and got me a job as a data entry clerk. And so I continued to work in various roles for that company over the next several years, when I finished my undergraduate and my master's degree in music education, fully intent on being either a band director or a trumpet teacher, trumpet player professionally, and potentially a musicologist. I really love music history. So that was the path that I was headed down. I left the industry briefly to actually teach, and had the opportunity to teach 5th through 12th graders in the public school band setting, and really enjoyed it, but ultimately decided to come back to Mississippi and finish my master's degree, and went back to work for the company and ended up realizing that I could have a better paying career than I could as a teacher, and ultimately made the decision to take that on full time, finish my degree, but pursue a different career path. I had really just sort of taken a liking to the leadership positions that I had found myself falling into, and it went from there.
That's awesome. And so now you're working with Crown Asset Management. And I know most of the people, again, are familiar with Crown because it is a very active debt buyer and is very active in the community. Obviously, Brian is on the board of directors of RMAI with me as well. But can you tell everybody a little bit about Crown and what you guys do there?
Sure. Crown was founded in 2004. We are a debt buyer, and like you said, Brian Williams is the founder, and we are active in the space and purchase different distressed receivables.
Awesome. So let's get to the real meat here, because I really wanted to talk to you about kind of leadership and these kinds of things, and know, as a music teacher and kind of with the background and the life experiences that you've had, can you tell us a little bit about, how that has had an effect on your leadership style?
Sure. There are really two aspects to that. There's my personal performance aspect and everything that I had to put into being a performer as a musician, but then there's also that piece of leadership that you learn being a part of that team setting and being a leader within that team setting. So from the personal perspective, I really learned how to hone in on perfecting my skills and being prepared to put myself in front of people. And so you do a lot of woodshedding, but the main thing is you really have to understand how to start with the basics every day. You have to, stretch and grow and practice your technique. And I really think that applies in a leadership role, with just kind of starting at square one every day and thinking about your mindset. What do I need to do to mentally stretch and prepare myself to lead my team every day and to have a really good set of interactions with everyone in a way that is beneficial to the larger group and not just myself? You learn as a member of any musical group, but particularly in a marching band where there's so many things going on at one time and so many moving pieces, you learn that it's never just about you. There's always so many different things that have to happen and so many things that have to come together to create that ensemble performance that you can be proud of and that can be competitive out there in the larger scheme of things.
Understood. So, as we talk about, leadership style, what would you say your leadership style is? Like, how do you lead your team?
So one of the core things or core values maybe that I had when I was teaching is I always felt like people live up to the expectations that you set and communicate to them.
Mhm.
And that was something early on that I put into practice with my students. If I expected them to show up late, if I expected to disrespect the students, to disrespect our space, to constantly want to have another teacher write a note to get them out of band class, that's what they were going to do. But if I expected them to show up and be respectful of each other, be respectful of our setting, and to work hard, that's also what they tended to do. And that's absolutely something that I've brought along with me into my leadership style. And it turns out that adults are not that different from working with students, and they really enjoy doing things well. They really enjoy meeting the expectations of the people around them. So it's really important to clearly set those and communicate those and constantly give feedback on how people are doing in regard to the expectations that you have for them.
So setting an expectation and providing feedback, two things
Mhm.
that I think any great leader really does. Because if you don't tell people what you want or what's expected of them, how are they ever going to know, what is how they can achieve that or how they can achieve beyond? Because you have those that always want to not just meet the expectations but exceed the expectations, and if they don't know where that line is drawn, running a race to nowhere, you go nowhere fast, right?
Right.
So and then providing feedback and letting them know where they are in that progress and process is also another important thing that I'm sure has been carried over to your work managing vendors, right? So if you're managing
Yeah.
collection vendors and setting that expectation and providing them with feedback and data and analytics and helping them understand the results that they're achieving, that's got to
Mhm.
really make a difference in terms of those relationships.
Absolutely. And I really love one of the things that I like to do each summer when drum corps is going on is I like to take a PTO day during the summer and go out and find where one of those groups is rehearsing, because I always find it so inspiring to see that group of kids out on the field anywhere from age 15 to 21, and they're constantly getting that feedback in real time. They're raising their hand if they're the one who had the challenge. The instructors in front of all of their peers are giving them that feedback on, okay, here's what we didn't do well this time, or here's why that was good. Here's what we can do to make this better. Now let's go run that set again. And then they stop and they give feedback. And it's like that every day. They're working to get better. They're working to prepare. And then they go and they compete that night and they put everything they learned that day and everything they worked so hard to perfect, they put on display and in competition in that same evening.
That's incredible. And that real-time feedback is such an important facet as well. And being able to understand how did I do today and not have to wait these long extended periods of time. I was recently visiting a client and I was driving back to the airport, which was like 2 hours. So I was listening to the 1 minute manager again because I just,
Mhm.
pulled out the audiobook or whatever. And as I was listening to it, they were talking about the instantaneous feedback and shortening those feedback cycles so that people aren't waiting a year for their next performance review to find out how they're doing. They're
Yeah.
finding out, every day, every week, every month, whatever the appropriate cycle is based on the relationship. And that to me really struck me. And I said, oh man, I really got to think about that and providing feedback. So I've started trying to provide more
Yeah.
feedback on a per meeting basis, whether it be externally or even just internally with my own team, whether it be leadership or those that are actually producing. And it's made a difference. I mean, it's very quickly providing that feedback starts to have a direct effect on how they're looking at their job, how they're looking at themselves, and how they're looking at their own progress, right?
Right.
Between individual performance reviews in the formal sense. And so, that's very interesting. Now, one of the other things that you and I talked about while we were at the airport, hanging out between flight delay after delay, was how you've applied some of your other personal,
Mhm.
personal favorite things to do, your personal hobbies into your leadership style, whether it be gardening or yoga. So talk to us a little bit about how you've taken some of these other things in your life and applied those to the way that you look at leadership and the way that you perform your leadership style.
Sure. I think probably my first word of advice for anybody listening is it's never a good idea to tell your team that anyone on your team that they should go try yoga. You're going to get all sorts of negative responses to that. So you have to be stealthy about finding ways to bring mindfulness into your feedback sessions and how you can find ways to bring that to your team and help them to learn to reflect and to find that quiet time to really think about the feedback they're getting or what their next project is and being able to visualize themselves being successful. And then from the gardening perspective, that's one of my favorite ones because I could not have kept a plant alive to save my life up until about 4 or 5 years ago. My husband and I moved into a house that had a beautiful backyard. They already had established flowers and trees and just all of these wonderful plants. And there were bearded irises that were gorgeous. And I wanted to be able to watch them thrive and figure out how to help them really produce every year and have the best flowers. What could I do to reproduce? What were the steps that I needed to take? What plants could I plant next to them? What did I need to do with the soil to make sure that everything was going to produce this beautiful garden that would attract all of the birds and the butterflies and the bees and make everything just this nice sanctuary in the backyard? And so you learn about things like deadheading your flowers, or, maybe you want to cultivate seeds, so you can't deadhead those flowers, or maybe you need to apply a specific fertilizer. So I think it all plays into things like, how do you figure out what in your organization are those dying pieces that can be pulled away? What are the processes that don't work anymore, that are standing in the way of new growth or the overall health of that plant really thriving? And, what's the fertilizer that each team member needs differently? An azalea needs something different than an iris does.
Mhm.
And each one of your team members needs something different from you. So how do you figure that out? How do you get to know that about each one of your people and really apply that? So as a group, you can have this beautiful, well partnered garden that produces all of these beautiful things for you and attracts all of the nature and things that can really help the whole ecosystem thrive.
Wow, that's insightful. And I'm sure as you're out there digging in the dirt, it gives you some time to think. I know I can't keep anything alive except for the hedges in my backyard, and I chose them very specifically because they attract butterflies. And for me, that was kind of the big thing. Like I wanted to see more wildlife around my neighborhood and those kinds of things. But in terms of developing those leaders, finding ways to connect with each individual on their level, what interests them, is difficult, right? And depending on the size
Yeah.
of your team, it could be even more difficult. And so you've got an internal team, and then you've got these external vendors that you're managing as well.
Mhm.
And so, what a large swath of relationships and people that you have to understand. And to really get to those nuances and to find different ways to find a personal connection with those individuals. Now, as you've kind of gone through this whole process, do you find yourself with a different connection with each person and kind of like a different wavelength with each person on your team in terms of how you're communicating with them, the frequency, the intensity, those kinds of things? Like, or how does that work for you?
Absolutely. I think the best thing you can do is figure out what is unique about each relationship, because there are so many ways that you can approach how you interact with everyone. But once you really take that time to get to know what your rhythm is with each person and what they need from you, what you need from them, and you've kind of set that framework, you figured that out, you're able to leverage each person in a way that supports you, renews you. I find that I gain so much strength from the different things that each one of my team members brings to the table. And I know when I need something, I know exactly who I need to go to help me with that thing. And we've also been able to develop just this great collaborative relationship where we give each other such constant feedback. It's just become so normalized for us to tell each other the things that we need to know to have a better relationship with each other and have a more productive relationship with each other. I mean, it's just gold, the stuff that I get back from my team. It could be something as simple as pointing out a mannerism that I did not know was undermining my authority in a group conversation when I really needed to get an important point across. Some mannerism that I had picked up along the way was reducing my ability to get my point across as effectively as I needed to. And the fact that a junior level team member feels comfortable coming and having that conversation with me, you know, in all genuineness and helping me in that way and giving me that insight, I couldn't ask for anything more.
No, absolutely. That's fantastic. Number one, to have a relationship with your team where you can have those kinds of comfortable conversations. I only hope that my own team feels the same way in communicating with me. And I try to include some levity or some, some sound bites and other things into our meetings just to try and make it a little bit more of an entertaining and approachable situation, right?
Yeah.
Because and I always tell clients in this space that, like, you want to be a financial institution, but you need to be an approachable institution if you're going to be successful in this space. Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to ask you about today, and it's kind of maybe tips for myself, right? And I know that you've been kind of working remote for a period of time and managing your team remotely, and now my entire team is remote. Like, I'm the only one in the office these days here in South Florida. Any tips for those of us that are trying to take what you've kind of talked to us about today and apply those in a remote setting?
I mean, I think communication is key. I try to set consistent touch points for my team. We have a routine set of times that we know we're going to talk to each other. And then beyond that, the team has also set their own routine of things that they need from each other. So I know that my team is going to be on together every morning up until our first meeting starts, where they
Mm.
have me, and they may not actually need anything from each other, but they know that they can pull up a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting and they can just have each other there, work on their work, and know that if a question pops up, my team is here as if we were sitting in the office together. And I think that's something that has really helped us learn to collaborate. Um, the other thing that we're trying to figure out is we realize that we've also, on the flip side of that, lost the art of the closed door. So when you're in the office and everybody's in the office, say you've got a session that you need to record, or you just need some time to do some deep work and you need some time alone, you shut your door. Well, you don't have that anymore when you're in your home office alone. So how can we leverage all of these tools that we have, or how can we define our communication style with each other to make sure that we're giving each other the freedom to do that? Because we all are going to have time, or sometimes that we need to pull back and we need to really just work on a project that is not a collaborative effort. So figuring out that dynamic and that way to communicate with each other so that you're there for each other, but you're also there for each other and providing space.
Mhm.
So you have to create some boundaries around what that looks like for you. What does your schedule need to look like? Think ahead. When do you need to take some time to practice and woodshed those things that you need to be everything that you have to be for your team? So, you can't forget about cultivating your own skills at the same time. You have to be willing to say, I'm here for you, but I need X number of hours each week to work on my leadership skills, to work on doing the tasks that I need to do so that I can be fully present when we are together.
That is great insight. I really appreciate you coming on today, Becca, and talking to me about leadership, your leadership style, your history, and how you've developed this unique leadership style, and especially how I can start to apply some of these techniques within my own organization working remotely. So, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Adam. It was fun to be here.
Absolutely. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask Becca or myself, you can leave them in the comments below here on YouTube or LinkedIn. Becca and I will both be linked below, or you can reach out to her directly on LinkedIn as well. If you have any additional topics that you'd like to see us cover, you can put those in the comments as well. I'm sure Becca and I would be happy to come on here and do another session for everybody, because we just love creating great content for a great industry. For those of you that are watching, thank you so much for your time today as well, and looking forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks again, Becca. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Adam. I'll talk to you later.